Welcome in. It's Battle for Freedom Tuesday morning. I hope you guys had a great Monday night. And folks, it is the first actual primary in the 2020 presidential election. New Hampshire, your turn to hopefully not screw it up, or, well, if you don't really care about the Dems, please continue to screw it all up. But I am not Watson Prenier. Yes, this is still Battle for Freedom. I am filling in for the last time this week for Watson. So right off the top, I have to say thank you for that opportunity to come to you. And thank you for the thoughtful discussion that took place yesterday during this show. So I encourage even more of that. You can hit up the Mojo 50 Radio Facebook page. You can see this show airing live there. You can comment on Twitter at The Coppens Show, COPPENS. You can head over to my YouTube page. If you are unable to see this show live on the Mojo 50 Radio Facebook page, it will be posted there later in the day. That is very simple, youtube.com/Andrew Coppens, youtube.com/Andrew Coppens. We have got a ton of stuff to talk about. And, I thought about continuing my series and my thoughts when it comes to the Catholic whole situation when it comes to voting for the Democratic side. But it's kind of funny because every single one of the 5 major candidates on that Democratic side got an opportunity to speak to the National Catholic Reporter. And it turns out that, well, they all were literally saying the same thing about every candidate. So I'm not going to go down that road. But I will say that Trump actually has released his budget. And, well, since I'm the numbers geek here on Mojo 50 Radio, it kind of kicked into high gear a little bit until some news broke. And I'll get into that. We're going to talk about the Never Trumpers continuing to go bat nuts crazy. Colin Kaepernick continues to be an absolute and utter tool, and AOC doubles down on her economic illiteracy. And like I said, I might also get into a little bit of this idea of social justice within the Catholic Church. We'll see if we actually have time for it. But before we get into the meat of the show, like I said yesterday, a hearty thank you to each and every one of you that participated in this month's Mojo 50 Radio promotion. The Bells of Liberty and American Pride Roasters, AOC. Sorry about that, DMX and DM. If you're listening, don't want to put you in that category, that's for sure. But thank you to American Pride Roasters and the Bells of Liberty for teaming up for this chocolate-covered strawberry flavored coffee. All sold out, but that doesn't mean that you still don't have an opportunity to donate to the Mojo 50 Radio cause. Head over to mojo50.com. Simply hit the donate button that's on the very, very top and donate what you feel, whether it was the $14 that would have gotten you the coffee, this limited edition coffee, or if you feel like $20 or even $5 or even $1. It all helps to the cause. You'll just have to stay tuned later this month as we unveil what March's special promotion will be and where things go beyond that. But a hearty thank you to each and every single one of you that participated and really just kind of blew through this promotion in a week's time. You had 2 full weeks, but you got it done in 1 single week. All right, so the biggest news to come out on Monday is that, well, President Donald J. Trump released his budget. Yes, folks, an actual budget proposal is on the table. Now, I'm going to buttress this, or at least preface, I should say, this whole conversation with the idea that, remember, Rush Limbaugh told us way back in July that fiscal conservatism was actually dead, and it was really a joke all along. He was just playing his part in this whole charade, right? But I would argue that he actually wasn't wrong. I thought at the time that, fiscal conservatism was a real thing and it should be a real thing. But it turns out that what took place in Washington, D.C. on Monday was all the proof that one needs that fiscal conservatism really was dead and that it was a joke all the way around. Normally, I would be asking important questions like, did President Trump play footsie with fiscal conservatism or just give up the jig? What were the numbers, right? The headlines in conservative media touting $4.6 trillion in reduction, $4.6 trillion of reduction in spending in this 10-year proposed budget. Normally that would be great news, right? That, just getting that amount of money out of the budget in 10 years would sound great. But one, that's only like 7% of the proposed actual budget during that entire time frame. It's some like $60 trillion. So congratulations on cutting 7%. But none of the policy analysis or the numbers that I would normally go into, right, beyond that idea of 7% and the $4.6 trillion, none of it that I would love to dive into really matters one stinking bit. And that's because the inaction of the politicians tell me all of this budgetary process is a joke to them. Handling our money responsibly is an absolute and utter joke to all of them in Washington, D.C. And that's because less than an hour later, magically, everybody on the Democratic side let us know that this proposal was dead on arrival in the House. This from the Hill, quote, Chuck Schumer called it a double cross of the American people. And then Sheldon Whitehouse, who was at least willing to look into reforming how the budgetary process works, said it was dead on arrival in the House. Now, none of that should be surprising from the party that's opposite of any president. Why would you just say, okay, yep, we're just going to, whatever you want, Mr. President, right? That would be stupid politics, at least on the rhetorical front. But this is a perfect example of how broken things are in Washington, D.C. Because here we are less than an hour into this entire budgetary process, and not only do we know that it's going to be dead on arrival, not only have people lined up to say that this was a double cross to the American people, but thirdly, we get indications that the House is not even going to touch an actual budget. The 2021 fiscal budget is nigh. They're not even going to do it. Why? Because this would be an election year, and putting them on record in any sort of actual real fiscal way would not be what? Good electoral politics. Now, the Constitution, the good stewardship of the taxpayer dollar, be damned. But remember, all the way back to this idea of mine that I had a few months ago with this hashtag #ImpeachDC movement, right? This is a prime example of what I've been talking about all along. Our government is not working for the people who elect them, whether you're left or right. I would argue that people on both sides of the aisle would love to have an argument over an actual budget. What are the priorities with our tax dollars? And then, most importantly, if you were to do that and have that actual honest debate on the House and Senate floors, the people might actually be able to go to the ballot box and be informed by your actual votes and the actual policy priorities you put down on paper. That's not how Washington, D.C. works. They want to whip up the rhetorical side of things without ever actually doing anything. Okay? Constitutional responsibilities and the principles of actual governance, be damned to these people. Keep on collecting that paycheck and set yourself up to enrich yourself the second you leave office. That's their priority. If we can't even get the people that were, supposedly wanting to do this job to actually do this job and do their basic constitutional duties, like I said on my show on Saturday, Critical Thinking, hit up the podcast on your favorite podcasting platform. We're there. I think it's iHeart, Spreaker, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, all of those podcastings, right? I have a very important question to ask, okay? If these people cannot even do the job that we elect them to do, And if you are in Congress, in the House of Representatives, your number one job is to actually set the budget. Okay? That's number one on your list. Then if you don't want to do your constitutional duties, should we not be altering the ties that bind us? Shouldn't we be looking at amendments or demanding change to our political system en masse to make these people held accountable to the voter, to us, the taxpayer? Now, you might say that that sounds like a very lofty goal, considering the fact that we've already dead on arrival, not going to happen budget process, shows all of the things that are wrong. And the idea that altering the ties that bind us could be a good thing. But is it realistic, right? That is the big question. How would we ever get to a point where this kind of government and this kind of political system doesn't work and doesn't happen anymore? Well, I think we can start with a few ideas that have been around for a while. I believe Mark Levin came up with some of these as part of his Liberty Amendments way back in 2013. Number one is you can set term limits on Congress and the Senate. Okay? Number one could be starting right there. But I think the second part is that you actually have to turn Senate elections back to the state houses. Now, for almost every single person that is alive today, they don't remember a time where they weren't allowed to elect their senators. But believe it or not, the Constitution, before that was actually altered in this way, set out to differentiate the House of Representatives from the Senate. The Senate was supposed to represent the collective interest of the state that they are representing, whereas the House of Representatives is supposed to be what? Responsive to we the people more so than the Senate is. Hence, more people in the House of Representatives, and hence equal representation of the state interest in the Senate. Okay? That makes, so let's go ahead and return the Senate back to the state houses. Let them deal with that. Because one, you're term limiting them. Two, you actually make it more responsive to the needs of the states of America. Not political interest, not all of these other things. You are beholden to the state house. They can recall you. They can do a lot of things within that effort. Then I think the third thing is that we have to pass a balanced budget amendment and then pursue a real course of fiscal limits on spending and taxation. We as a society have got to have this larger conversation about what our real priorities are when it comes to taxes. You know, Bernie Sanders uses this entire idea of the Scandinavian socialist model. Well, when it turns out it's really free market economics that make that engine run, and they have an agreed upon social safety net for things like healthcare, for things like, schooling and all of those things. But they don't come with all these other strings that are attached, such as, higher taxes on millionaires and billionaires, higher taxes on this group than that group, and so on and so forth. Taxes are flat, and everybody has an agreed upon idea of the principles that they're trying to achieve. So when I say taxation, we have got to have that conversation. Do we want to go to a flat tax? Do we want everybody kicking in a percentage of their yearly income? And most importantly, rein in all the loopholes that are existing in this country. Okay? So also, along with the spending limits and taxation limits, most importantly, no budget, no congressional pay, and there is no recourse for back pay either. Either you do your damn job and you get paid, or you don't and you don't get paid. Kind of like the rest of us in American society. If I don't do the job that I'm supposed to be doing, I'm probably fired. Yet, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, all these people for literal decades have been in power in Washington, D.C. You set the term limits, you turn the Senate back to the state houses, you pass that balanced budget amendment, and you force them to do their damn jobs. Now, I think the other part here has to be that you allow the states to nullify federal law by a simple 2/3 majority of the states. And you might say, well, what are the details there? All I can tell you on this end is that what we need to do is be able to make government more agile and more responsive. And one of the ways to do that is nullification of federal laws. Because you got to remember that there's this thing called the 10th Amendment. What is not enumerated in the setup of the government is supposed to go to the states. So let's let the states have more power, thus more responsive to the citizenry and thus more agile. If we want to really deal with some problems in society or things that are having a rough time being passed at the federal level, or things that aren't working at the federal level and they refuse to do anything about it, let's let the states do something about it. Now, all of these ideas are in the book, I believe it's called Liberty Amendments by Mark Levin, like I said before. And I honestly think they're still as relevant today in 2020 as they were in 2013 when he first penned that book. Now, given the blinders of some people that voted for Trump in this, he can do no wrong, and then also the blinders of those that hate him on the left and in the Never Trump movement, none of this is likely to actually get done right now. But I cannot give up on the Constitution, and I still believe there are enough liberty-loving and critically thinking-minded people out there to make these types of changes. It is going to take a lot of work. I'm not going to say this is an overnight solution, but at the end of the day, we have got to get out of this Team GOP versus Team Democratic mindset and start really looking at this through the lens of what is actually good for us, the American people, as a whole. Principles, not party, should be mattering here. And again, I will go back to the Declaration of Independence for this idea of impeach DC and remind you of these words. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shewn that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. Now, are the evils that we're seeing, $1 trillion deficits, all this fiscal irresponsibility, these endless wars that are going on, the stuff that I had talked about yesterday, how the hell did Trump run on this idea of ending these wars? And we're about to go into another election cycle, and we just had more people killed in Afghanistan due to a green on blue event, aka friendly fire event. How is that still allowed to happen, right? And, are we really going to suffer to continuously suffer? Are these evils sufferable? That is a good question that we must answer as an American society. But again, in the Declaration of Independence, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. Given the fact that they're holding our taxation or our tax dollars basically at ransom right now and doing whatever the hell they want to do with it, rather than being responsive to us, the people that are paying their salaries and keeping the government afloat through this theft that we call taxation, I would say that they have a tyranny going on. I would say that we have had a long train of abuses and usurpations. So I'm not saying that we need a revolution in the terms of war and all those things. I'm saying that we've got to have a revolution of ideas. Do this whole impeach DC movement, right? Much as I said yesterday. We have got to clean house of a government unwilling to stand up and do its damn job. And then we clean that out and we start over with people willing to do those jobs that are enumerated in the Constitution. But along with this cleaning of house comes these amendments that we need to be able to put the guideposts in place to allow government to actually be responsive to us, the people, again. Okay? We've got to get back to constitutional principles, but we can't do that with just a one-fold approach. It's got to be twofold, right? Voting and then demanding changes to the ties that bind us as a country. Return to the constitutional principles instead of running away from them. I know, a super radical idea these days. Now, I think that after some 244 years as a country, and I think it's like 232 years if I got my dates correct here, since this Constitution thing was actually ratified, we have a pretty good window into the idea that this thing does need to be altered. It is not working, and that we make it actually work for the people and not the people working for the political class. Now, lest you think that I'm sounding much like Bernie Sanders and AOC and all those wonderful people, who do you think gets enriched in their scheme of socialism? It ain't the proletariat, it's the political class. It's always the political class. Look at the oligarchs. Look at the Castros. Look at Venezuela. Look at Maduro. Look at all of the people that have tried socialism. Ask yourself, how did Maduro go from nothing to an insanely wealthy man? He took the wealth of his people for himself. Okay? So going down that road of socialism makes no damn sense either. If those elected officials are not going to be serious about budgets and spending our tax dollars, maybe we shouldn't send in our tax dollars. Now I know that's been fixed for us since the 1940s, thanks to good old FDR. And, this whole idea of not paying taxes, probably not a smart decision, considering you go to the clinker, and good luck getting the job after that. But anyway, my point here is let's think about the questions that I've asked and ask yourself deep down if you believe that we need to alter the ties that bind us. If the answer is yes, then join me in the hashtag ImpeachDC movement. Spread the hashtag on social media at The Coppens Show. That's COPPENS, COPPENS. And let's start that conversation. Now, you might be asking, what does Trump love more than money? Because we just got done talking about money, right? I would say he loves stirring up controversy. And one of the biggest non-political controversies was actually around Colin Kaepernick, which you could say is kind of a political controversy. But anyway, Kaepernick and his protests of the NFL. Well, it turns out Colin Kaepernick is back in the news, just not in, any way that makes any damn sense. This news came from Oliver Luck, the father of Andrew Luck, the former Indianapolis Colts quarterback and the commissioner of the XFL. He let us know that Kaepernick, not about playing football, but about the almighty dollar. Now, the reporting says that Luck didn't get specific on his actual price, but we know that last season Kaepernick told the American Association of Football that he wanted $20 million to play in that league, and that this conversation happened around the same time. So I'm guessing it was around $20 million here. Now, maybe that $20 million figure was him just trying to pit the leagues against each other, but I'm not sure how smart of a look that actually was. From a free marketeer perspective, I give Kaepernick credit for saying, this is what I believe I am worth, and I'm going to stick to that gun, right? And he's not going to accept less just to play the game. But from a personal perspective, this guy is just full of crap. He has a real funny way of showing that he really has the game in his bloodstream, and then that this is
Some
not
things
all
are
about
out of
money,
your control,
which he repeatedly claimed before. So when you're Colin Kaepernick and you claim that you love football, but you're only willing to pay for or play for $20 million instead of 15, I mean, come on, dude. At some point in time, it is literally all about the money. Just come out and say it. There should not be a problem with that. All right, folks, I believe we're about to hit a break here on Mojo 50 Radio. I'll be back for the second half of Battle for Freedom in just a bit. What's good, people? Welcome back into Battle for Freedom. I'm Andrew Coppins, pulling guest hosting duties for the one and only Watson Prunier. I don't know which one of us is more handsome. I'll let you be the judge. Maybe I shouldn't. No, I'm just kidding. But thank you so much for that opportunity, Watson. And most importantly, thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in yesterday and today, whether that was through iHeartRadio, which didn't happen yesterday due to technical issues. Hopefully today that is all ironed out, but you can always watch this program over at the Mojo 50 Radio Facebook page. Thank you to each and every one of you that have done so and participated in all of the things that we've got going on there. But like I said up front during this show, you can follow me on the socials at The Coppins Show. That's COPPENS, COPPENS, if you're seeing or hearing me for the very first time. Now, at the top of the show, I told you that we were going to talk about the bat-nuts craziness of the Never Trumpers coming out of the woodwork once again. That's going to happen real quick, and then we're going to flip over to AOC's continued economic illiteracy, and then maybe a few other little nuggets of information sprinkled in for your viewing and listening pleasure. So, as we talk about the Never Trumpers, what comes to mind when I say the name Bill Kristol? Well, it used to likely be something like, oh, that was that dude on Fox News that talked about conservatism and neocons and all of those things. But today, he's just this loon bag who can't get over Trump winning the election in 2016, is now a proud Never Trumper. He started this thing called The Bulwark with Charlie Sykes, who is a former radio host out of Milwaukee and perhaps the most famous talker in the Midwest, not named Steve Dace. He also was a failed leader of this magazine called The Weekly Standard, running it literally into the ground with his utter incompetence and his contempt for Donald Trump. You know, because nothing says good business sense like principled hatred of Trump ruining this magazine of supposed conservative principles. But I wanted to talk about this in the larger sense, in the broader sense of what is happening within the 2020 election, because we got some news about how desperate the Never Trump movement really is. Just how desperate has that movement become? Well, according to the Daily Wire, one Bill Kristol, that paragon of conservative virtue, was putting money and time behind an effort to tank Bernie Sanders in the New Hampshire primary. New Hampshire? Yes, folks, think about this. This supposed principled conservative is more worried about what is happening in the Democratic primary. According to the report, Kristol led a robocall effort in New Hampshire. New Hampshire. Okay, according to the report, this is what is said. GOP leading independent voters in New Hampshire are receiving phone calls and texts from anti-Trump Republicans urging them to cross the aisle and vote in the Democratic primary on Tuesday, NH Journal has learned. The message is for these unaffiliated voters who can vote in either party's primary to vote for a reasonable and electable Democrat in the alternative to Donald Trump. National Never Trump leader Bill Kristol, founder of the conservative Weekly Standard magazine, confirmed to NH Journal that he is part of the effort, which involves tens of thousands of New Hampshire voter contacts and a six-figure budget. Quote, "Yep, I'm happy to have joined with some others to help remind New Hampshire independents who might be accustomed to voting in the Republican primary that this year they may be able to make more of a difference by voting for a responsible and electable candidate in the Democratic primary," Kristol said. Now, will any of this actually come to pay off come election time? By the way, election time is actually happening right now as we speak in New Hampshire. Well, the early indications do not look good for the Never Trump movement here. Now, mind you, this effort comes from the same guy who believes that voting for a Democrat in the 2020 election would be better, even if it actually meant voting for Bernie Sanders. Do you see the problem? May I suggest, if your hatred of one single person causes you to abandon your supposed principles, you're the one doing it wrong. All sorts of wrong. Now, also ask this of Bill Kristol and his ilk. Were you actually a conservative ever? Or did you just enjoy the money that conservatives would fork out to you for this alternative media viewpoint that you were presenting to them? Principled conservatism is anathema to socialism, Mr. Kristol. It is the exact opposite of socialism. Now, you might say, well, but he was leading the effort to not put Bernie Sanders into the Democratic frontrunner position. You would be right in that assumption, okay? You would totally be right in saying that he wants anybody but Bernie Sanders on the Democratic side. But this is the same guy who said anybody but Trump, because what he wants is people in the middle. And he thinks that beating Trump is going to have to come from this supposed centrist candidate that doesn't exist on the Democratic side. Of course, he's talking about Pete Buttigieg more than anybody else, right? That's exactly where he was going here, okay? But you cannot square real conservative values, even if you want to say it's just his brand of neoconservatism, political belief, with those beliefs of the Democratic Party of today. There's literally no room at the inn for your kind of people in that party. Let's just take a look at Tulsi Gabbard, because, she dares to go against the social orthodoxy of the left, and what happens to her? She ends up being shunned, and probably the most severe of anybody in the Democratic Party today. We are not all Democrats when it comes to getting Donald Trump out of office. We shouldn't be Democrats just because you don't like the way that a vote went in the Senate or how Trump is governing. I think Kimberly Ross said it best in her Twitter response to Bill Kristol's absolutely bat-nuts crazy assertion that we're all Democrats hoping to get, I believe it was John Bolton and some others, to testify in the Senate for the impeachment trial. As Kimberly Ross said on Twitter, quote, "Not even close. I've been an independent conservative since before the 2016 election and take plenty of issue with Trump and any uncritical supporters, but am no more sympathetic to the Democratic cause than I was before. This Democrat by default mindset is sheer nonsense." Ross gets it exactly right. Exactly right. I've been very much an independent, more so on a libertarian side of things for a very long time. And that's part of the reason why I didn't vote for Trump. I also didn't vote for Trump in 2016 due to personal feelings on his character and some of those things. I thought that was not the temperament and the look that the Republicans needed if they wanted to maintain power. And I was right, because in 2018, poof, that power went out the window, so to speak. But I also need to talk to you real quick about the man that I actually voted for in that last election, Evan McMullin, because that dude's organization, Stand Up Republican, their daily email newsletter blast called The Top Line, is some of the best comedy I get every single day. Seriously, if you are not a subscriber to that newsletter, find it. It will at least enlighten you into that never Trump mindset and thought process, and hopefully provide you with the hours of laughter that it provides for me. Take for this, for instance, last week, the Top Line was breaking about all of those protests all throughout the country of Trump's acquittal in the Senate trial for impeachment. Read a paragraph into this whole idea, and it turns out just 50 people protested out in front of the White House before being arrested. That was the source of pride for McMullin and his cohorts like Tara Setmeyer, who used to run around telling us about her principled conservatism and her conservative roots as host of Real News on The Blaze. 50 people? That's hardly a protest. That's just a gathering of individuals of like minds. That's ridiculous. So let me give a little bit of advice to Evan and Tara and Mindy Finn, who's also over at Stand Up Republic. Let me give you this little bit of advice. I could get 50 people to protest literally anything in front of the White House. So could Joe Schmo down the street. Hell, even Brad Staggs could get 50 people to show up and protest in front of the White House. Maybe protest people being on the roof. Just saying. That is not an accomplishment. It's just a sign of how little the American people cared about this impeachment situation. Thousands, hundreds of people, tens of thousands protesting, whether in DC or across the country, maybe then you've got the point. But there were maybe a couple thousand people across this entire great 50 states. Even if you did 50 times 50, you would, I mean, give me a break, man. That is nothing to be, proud about. It's ridiculous. And then on Monday, the top line tells us Bill Barr versus Eric Holder, right? They tell us that Bill Barr is just Trump's bootlicking attorney general lackey. Well, some of that could be true, okay? Some of that is true about Bill Barr. He's doing the bidding of Donald Trump, that's for sure, but that's what an attorney general is kind of supposed to do. But to, again, Evan and Mindy and Tara, Eric Holder, which one was worse? Bill Barr actually, holding up the Constitution, or Eric Holder literally making everything into a race case, making everything a absolute disaster on the federal level? Eric Holder was definitely a bootlicker. Janet Reno before him? Bill Barr is not Eric Holder and not Janet Reno. This is an individual who really cares about the truth of the matter more than he cares about doing Trump's bidding. Whereas Eric Holder was literally Barack Obama's best pal, best buddy. It was literally a rubber stamp on whatever Obama wanted to do with the Justice Department. Again, this is just another example of the Never Trump movement's blinders that exist. A great example, a third example, Alexander Vindman and Gordon Sondland. Their firings. Oh my God, how dare he do that? And how dare Donald Trump retaliate? Now, I'm going to ask a very simple question of all of you listening, watching. If you are a manager of anything, if you are a business owner, and you find out that people that are working underneath you, or people that you might entrust to run certain parts of your business, or maybe they run a sub-department within the department that you're managing, and you find out that they do not hold the same values that you do, that you're not pushing in the same direction as you would like them to, what would you do? I think one, you would talk to them, and then two, you're probably going to fire them if they continue to not share those same ideas and values. Alexander Vindman and his brother and Gordon Sondland, it became very clear during the testimony that they gave during this entire impeachment fiasco that they don't serve at the leisure of the president. They think they're better than the president when it comes to his policies in the Ukraine, when it comes to his policies all throughout Europe, and his foreign policy agenda writ large. They don't represent his viewpoints. I'll give you a hint, Never Trumpers. Vindmans and Sondland serve at the leisure of the President of the United States of America. If this was Barack Obama, would you say that Gordon Sondland should have been fired and Vindman should have been fired because they clearly were attempting to undermine the foreign policy objectives? Whatever those objectives are, you can object to those objectives, but this is insanity. This is the level of insanity these people have gotten to, folks, when they can't even recognize that people who don't share the same principles or the same commonality or the same common goals shouldn't be in the same room together. It was very clear that Vindman had his own agenda It was clear that Sondland was not comfortable doing what Trump would like him to do. Now, you might say that it appeared that Sondland was being asked to do things that were very sketchy. You might be true. But at the same point in time, then maybe Sondland could have, I don't know, resigned his position if he felt that way, or brought that up strenuously. Instead, these people behind closed doors objected while talking to each other all the time. You cannot run an organization if you cannot trust the people that you are entrusting to help run and speak on behalf of yourself and the values that you're trying to get out into the world. As I've made clear many times before, I didn't vote for Trump, but there's a difference between not voting for somebody and having blinders on so bad that you're unwilling to support good Trump, call out bad Trump, and then leave it at that. If all you can see is him being an evil, authoritarian dictator, it's time to re-examine your life. Folks, it is really time to re-examine that. And most importantly, if you think that, I would ask you, what do you think Barack Obama was all about, especially given the fact that he rammed down an entire 1/5 of our economy change called Obamacare? Was that not authoritarian dictator? By your own standards? So maybe what it is it's time for you to, and us as a society, also re-examine how much importance we actually put on the presidency. Because in theory, the presidency is a figurehead position. It's got no necessarily real power behind it. Now, you can make the arguments that the way the Supreme Court has worked has basically given carte blanche to the individual that holds that position through executive powers and executive orders, and basically Congress just allowing that office to basically run roughshod over the other 2/3 of the federal government. You can make those arguments, and I would agree with you, but that is a larger question. We're just talking about Trump and the Never Trump movement right now. So to bring it full circle, Crystal also, by the way, now heads up this group called Defending Democracy Together, with fun little sideshow organizations called Republicans for the Rule of Law, Republicans Fighting Tariffs, Republicans Against Putin, the Russia Tweets, and Stand With Allies, a group all about standing with the Kurds in Syria or something, because Bill Kristol can't possibly figure out that the Kurds in Syria are not the Kurds that were actually fighting alongside of us, by the way. Those are not the Kurds of northern Iraq. Those are the Kurds of Syria, two very different, distinguished, different groups of people who had varying levels of help from us and with us in their battles, in their regions, okay? But think about that. Republicans against Putin. Who is not against Putin? Unless you're an actual avowed communist here in the United States, I think everybody says Putin is bad. The rule of law for Republicans? Are you kidding me? Republicans fighting tariffs. That's something we all should be fighting against, because we all know that tariffs are really not something that works unless you're not dealing with a level playing field. And depending on how you structure these tariffs, I would say tariffs are not the way to go. I just don't believe that what we've seen actually has been working in that area. But anyway, if that all doesn't add up to bat nuts crazy for you, the fact that you're going out of your way to oppose literally everything, and then creating all of these groups that stand up for things that the people would be standing up for anyway, that's insanity to me. Absolute bat nuts crazy insanity. But you know what's almost as insane and actually as fun as poking the Never Trumpers or exposing their insanity? Putting a microphone in front of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and letting her talk about anything, like for real. By now, you've actually heard her make herself into the butt of every joke for her literal interpretation of a metaphor about pulling oneself up by the bootstraps. But a new week, and she's apparently still doubling down on her economic illiteracy big time. This time, she demanded that we all pay attention to what one of her witnesses in that hearing had to say about the real poverty line, telling us all, quote, "For GOPers who spent this week mocking the poor with bootstrap jokes, why don't you listen to Miss Hutchinson's testimony and give one damn reason why we shouldn't have an accurate poverty line in this country? Unless, of course, you were talking without paying attention to the actual hearing." Unquote. It's nothing, Naturally, this all had to come in the form of that angry tweet AOC that you can see around all the time, because social media is the only way that apparently she knows how to effectively communicate. But the larger point here is that, once again, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doesn't see that a metaphor does not have to be literal to make sense. It's a metaphor for a reason. She should know what that feels like, though, by the way, because every time she opens her mouth on economics, she doesn't make any damn sense. Furthermore, this whole "you didn't get there by yourself" mantra is becoming a real thing for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She is really sticking to the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, talking points, so credit to her for that. And I've got to, most importantly, give her puppet masters in the Democratic Socialists of America some serious credit, because damn, is she an effective person when it comes to those talking points. She never gets off of them. Even if, her economics degree, basic parts of her economics degree would tell her the exact opposite is true. Now, we can remember all the way back to 2018 when she said the following: yes, of course, it's classic Republican bootstrap meritocracy, where the smartest, hardest working, most fitting person for the job just so happens to be your son-in-law, again via Twitter. Now, that was an obvious reference to Donald Trump and Jared Kushner, but she would go on to give us this wonderful following rant, according to the Daily Wire. Quote, "She then attempted to elaborate on her premise that no one is self-made in America, specifically citing those who serve in the military and businesses that get tax breaks. Quote, what does bootstrapping mean to the GOP? That you didn't go to public school? That you didn't enlist in the military, which is funded by the government? That you never got a tax break for starting a business or buying a home? That your parents never used food assistance to feed you? Question for the GOP, does starting a business with a $60 million loan from your dad count as bootstrapping?" she asked in another post. Quote, "Does getting a $2 trillion corporate handout from the GOP count as bootstrapping? Asking for a corrupt president and his friends." Ocasio-Cortez then cited her own rags to riches story as supposed evidence that Americans don't elevate their economic status by willpower, hard work, and talent, because she received some help from others along the way. Quote, "I worked my butt off to get elected against all odds, without any special connections or money," she tweeted in a follow-up post. Quote, "I worked double shifts and wore through my shoes, outspent 10-1 to get elected. Even with all that hard work, it would be narcissistic to pretend I bootstrapped it alone and without others." At least she gets that point, because this is a prime example of why you've earned your place in the Lying Liars Club. Yes, you were outspent 10-1 in that entire election, but did you really work your butt off to get elected? You won a primary in which your opponent just ignored you and then sailed through unchallenged in a general election because it's, New York City. So congrats on that hard path to victory. Furthermore, can we talk about this notion that you didn't have any special connections or money as well? And then thirdly, can we also talk about how total bullshit all of this is when it comes to you? Because I'm pretty sure the person that got most of the help for you also happened to be a nepotistic hire of yours, yet you rail against nepotism and you rail against crony capitalism. But when you have an opportunity to demonstrate the opposite, you don't. It's all bullshit. Does this last name Chakrabarty ring a bell to you, AOC? because it should. He was the one that bankrolled your entire congressional campaign through this Justice Democrats organization. Oh, and that's right. He has all sorts of connections. And then what did you do? The nepotistic thing, like I said, and you hired him not only for your campaign, but then as your chief of staff when you went over to the House of Representatives. Oh, and then don't not forget that you also made sure to allow him to allegedly funnel some $1 million in campaign money illegally as well. Do I have to go back to the wonderful Washington Examiner, who will tell us that in 2016 and 2017, Chakrabarty's PACs raised about $3.3 million for this entire project, primarily from small donors. During this time, the committees transferred over $1 million to 2 shell companies controlled by Chakrabarty, with names similar to one of the PACs, Brand New Campaign LLC and Brand New Congress LLC, according to federal election filings. A few weeks after starting the Brand New Congress PAC, Chakrabarty formed one of the companies using a registered agent service and mailbox-only address. Over the next 7 months, a small dollar political donations poured into the PAC from progressives across the country. The committee transferred over $200,000, 82% of the contributions, to the company Brand New Campaign. Goes on and on. It adds up to over $1 million. That's a violation of campaign finance law. Yet, you want to lecture any of us, and I mean any of us, on doing moral good and doing the right things? Clean up your own house. Clean that up first. Just saying, this whole principle, those in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. All right, folks. So on that note, I think we're going to put a bow here on the show. I want to say a massive thank you to Watson Prenier for allowing me to be here both on Monday and today. I hope you enjoy the First in the Nation primary. The results will come out tonight. And don't forget, you're going to have real Brad Staggs. That's right, at Real Brad Staggs in the Daily Mojo. You're going to have Jim Dawes right now coming up, and followed by That's What She Said, Americanuck Radio, a whole host of great programs, The Rants of Izzo, my wonderful Chicago brother in Dominic Izzo, and then, of course, the Defenders of American Exceptionalism coming your way. It is going to be a great, great, great lineup of content for you, so please keep it locked in all day on Mojo 50 Radio. Until next Saturday, where my show airs at 5 p.m. Central Time, keep being smart, keep being safe. Matthew 5:44.